Thank you to everyone who has joined this. I'm Brunswick County Commissioner Frank Williams, and this is a forum that I started years ago. Pre-COVID, we did these in person, and obviously during COVID, when I did them, we moved them to virtual, and that turned out to be a good format because we can pull in speakers who don't necessarily have to be in the area, and you can tune in without having to leave your office, and plus we can record them and share them later. So I do thank everyone for participating. We do have quite a bit of interest in this one. Today's topic is transportation, and I will tell you that this is a complex topic. I'm on 3 regional transportation planning boards. I'm on 2 of them. We are part of 3 of them. But one of the things that makes North Carolina different than many other states is there are no county roads in North Carolina. I'm willing to bet a lot of the people who are tuning in, if you moved here from somewhere else, you had county roads. And North Carolina does not have county roads under state law. So that's one thing that sets us apart from many of the other places that people who now live in Brunswick County used to live. As I mentioned, there are 3 regional transportation planning boards that cover parts of Brunswick County, and that's where county commissioners get involved in the transportation process. And I won't get too in the weeds on that because I think Chad's going to touch on that, but that's where we represent you and share opinions on what projects we think need to be put on the list to be considered, and then help eventually prioritize those projects and put them into the hopper and hope and pray that they get funded. Again, it's a complex process. If you have questions, there's a Q&A feature in this webinar, and you can submit your questions there, and we'll get to those at the end. Or Chad, if you see one you want to answer on the fly, you can do that. I'll leave that up to you. But with that, I'm excited to have our NCDOT Division 3 engineer, Chad Kimes, with us. I've gotten to know Chad through the transportation committees that I serve on, and he is very capable and very responsive and has done a lot of things to help Brunswick County. If we need something, he responds. And if he can't do it, he tells us, but if he can do it, he does it. And I appreciate that. So Chad, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Frank. We're going to see if we can get this going. So you want to, Frank, just real quick, do you want to save the questions toward the very end? Or
if they come, if you see one you want to answer on the fly, I'll leave that up to you. If you want to save them to the end, that we can, I'd say it depends on the question. If it's one you know you've got planned ahead later in the presentation, maybe save it for that point. But if you see one that fits with what you're talking about, you can answer it then, and we'll just play that as we go.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And like Frank said, my name is Chad, and basically what you're seeing here is just a quick glance of Division 3. There's actually 14 divisions in the state. I manage all of DOT's activities in basically Southeast North Carolina and the counties that you see there in red. So what is DOT responsible for in general? We look after project development from the very beginning. We look after the construction of all the projects, and then we maintain our system. And our system is, in this part of the region, is about 12,000 lane miles, and we've got about 700 bridges. We also include our welcome center as part of us, our ferry system, our ports, and also our rest areas and airports. So that's just a general overview. So basically anything DOT related, I am responsible for all those activities. So one of the parts of DOT that's very important is planning of projects. So as Frank mentioned earlier, as he is part of 2 of the planning organizations in Brunswick County. Brunswick County has 3 planning organizations. So these planning organizations assist the DOT. We work together on identifying project needs for the next anywhere from 20 to 30 years. I'm going to get into the differences. But first of all, the 3 of the MPOs and RPOs that's in Brunswick County is Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization, the WMPO. You can see this one highlighted here. You will hear me say WMPO the rest of this presentation. Just remember that's the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization, the WMPO. We also have the Grand Strand, which is out of South Carolina, that covers a portion of the area. They basically cover from Charlotte, Holden Beach, Ocean Isle Beach, and that general area there. The rest of the area is covered by the Cape Fear RPO. So here are just some differences between the MPOs and the RPOs. For the MPOs, it's an urbanized area that's got a population that's greater than 50,000. The MPOs are mandated by federal law. You will see here in a few minutes why that is important. A large portion of our funding comes from the federal government, so this is why that is developed by federal law. They are required to maintain a metropolitan transportation plan. I will be using the acronym MTP a lot during this presentation for that, but just remember that is their long-range 20-year plan out of the MPO. That one does have to be fiscally constrained, so they are given a budget within the 20 years of a proposed budget. That doesn't mean the money's there, but they are given a dollar amount that should be there based on the current revenues. And then the main part of that is to identify projects and be able to put it into that MTP. Basically, in North Carolina, there's 19 MPOs. Brunswick County has 2 of those 19. RPOs, main difference really between the MPO and RPO, it's not federally required, but North Carolina stated that they also wanted those areas not under MPO to also be covered, so it's mandated by state law. They also do a comprehensive transportation plan. We call that a CTP. This one is not fiscally constrained, but it's close. It's very similar, held to the same as the MTP. And once again, it's identifying needs in the state for the next 30 years there. Currently in North Carolina, there's 20 RPOs, and once again, Brunswick County has 1 of those 20. This just kind of gives you an overview of the division in a whole. We basically have 3 MPOs and 3 RPOs for this part of the state, and not going to get into too many details about that one. So what do we all do? It's probably one of the most important partnerships that we have for our transportation needs, period, in the state. These plans that are being developed, either the 20-year or the 30-year plan, that's the starting point. That's how projects become a reality. I would say if you look around all the completed road projects in the area, it started from feedback, whether it's from the public, from the city, from the county, it comes from everywhere. And you will see the amount of input that we request during this process. But this is where we identify our projects, and then we start to see how to get those funded. The slide here, not going to go into too much detail here, but it kind of gives you an update for the CTP. For the RPO, there's and this will be given out to everybody, but this will give you an update on their current CTP for Brunswick County. WMPO has just recently kicked off their MTP plan. This is the website with that information, and GSATS is wrapping up their MTP. A lot of information going on right now on developing these plans, a lot of opportunities for the public to come and give their comments, and you can do that by going to those websites and seeing when those public information is being requested. Now, you have these 20 and you have these 30-year plans, and you got the needs of the DOT. How do you fund the projects? What's the reality of getting them funded? So we are currently, the DOT has a 10-year program called the State Transportation Improvement Program. And you will hear me call this the STIP, the TIP, but it is our 10-year Transportation Improvement Program. The first 5 years of that 10-year program is what we call fully committed. That means it's fully funded. We are going to get to right of way and construction in the next 5 years. Money is funded. We'll make that clear. The last 5 years is projects that are identified. They are scoring really high. They're not scoring high enough to get fully funded, but we are getting funded to start design on those projects because it appears that they will probably be moving into the next 5 years as we move forward in the 10-year plan. So, and then every 2 years, we go through a prioritization process to try to fund projects into this 10-year plan. Our prioritization process, as I stated, is every 2 years. It is solely based on data. Basically, the data looks at safety, congestion, the benefit to cost, local priorities. You can look at freight, but it's just looking data-driven process. There is no opinions on this. You take a section that may need improvements and you run it through this program and it spits out numbers and we see how it competes against other projects in the state. Real quick, in a 2-year period, roughly DOT expects in revenue around $6.5 billion to go toward new projects every 2 years. That $6.5 billion is roughly split up into 3 categories, and that's statewide, regional, and division. And this is where it starts getting really complicated, but for the purpose of this today, the statewide pot, 40% of the, on average, $6.5 billion, all projects in the state, like we will compete against a project in Charlotte. And as you know, Charlotte might have 100,000 cars a day. Our take a road like 133 on River Road may only have 20,000 cars a day. So it's hard for a project on River Road to compete against a project in Charlotte just based on congestion. So the 2 big pots that really hit hard here that we go after on funding is under the regional impact, and that's 30% of the pot, and then division, which is 30% of the pot, but the division gets all that money to put on the needs. But in each of these categories, they still compete against each other. Once they're not competing with statewide, when you fall into regional, they compete against another part of North Carolina, which is up in the Greenville, New Bern area. And then the division projects in all 6 counties are competing against each other. And I'm not going to go into all the local input, but this is basically how we do our prioritization process. Like I said earlier, this is a 2-year process. These next 2 slides is to show you the amount of public input. We just kicked this off back in July. We're now identifying projects, working with our planning partners on how many projects are going to be submitted. We are maxed on how many projects can be submitted. NCDOT only gets 14 projects for each mode, where the planning organizations, the MPOs and the RPOs roughly get between 18 and 21, depending on their size, is how many they get. So we have to narrow it down, make those decisions. There are plenty of opportunities during this 2-year process for public input. In a 2-year prioritization cycle, there are 4 opportunities to get input from the public on what we're ranking as top priorities. So plenty of feedback there. Lastly, I just want to talk about our general financial expenses for NCDOT. And this is a very current standing right here. You will see a cash balance of NCDOT. Our checking account today is at $2.4 billion. That is of today. Our open commitments, and what this means is all the projects that are out to construction and that has been committed. Take 211 in Brunswick County for an example. That's a $220 million project for the next 5 years. It's inside this open commitments. We are healthy at DOT today. If you look over here at this cash as open commitments, to me, this is the most important slide on here. We generally like our cash balance to commitments to be around 30%. You can see in the last 10 years how it's gone up a little bit in 2019 and 2020. These were a couple of dark years for NCDOT. NCDOT basically went bankrupt in those years, and that's really because the gap between the cash balance and the open commitments. There were some other issues with storms and cost increases, but anyway, those have been addressed, and DOT has been rock solid for the last 3 years. But this is very healthy. Just got to throw a plug out there. We're able to address any storms that hit, any maintenance issues. I hope everybody's seeing we're mowing on a more regular basis. You're seeing more litter being picked up in the county. That's because of this being a lot healthier than it has been. And last slide on some of the finances, just to give everybody an overview. Where does our money come from? This is good education for everybody because a lot of people don't know this, but basically all of our income comes from gas tax. Our motor fuels is this one big piece of the pie here on this, but roughly every year NCDOT receives a little over $7 billion in revenue. When you go buy a vehicle, you pay highway use tax. That's another piece of the pie. And then every year when you renew your license plates, that's another piece of the pie. Over here is the federal highway reimbursement to or payments to the DOT revenue. Once again, that comes from gas tax. I do want to put a plug in. For the first time in the history of DOT has started receiving additional revenue outside of these that you see on here, and that is sales tax. The legislation passed 2 years ago to start taking a portion of the sales tax, and that will be maxed out at 6%. And that will start coming to DOT as well. As you can see, 6% of the state sales tax makes a very small piece of the pie. But that is a step in the right direction. And the reason why I say that, roughly the gas tax rate has been the same for the last 30 years. And think about how more fuel efficient the vehicles are today and with the amount of electric vehicles on the road today. How does DOT split those funds up? Basically, half goes straight into construction. These are your new construction projects like 211. And then the other large piece of it is maintaining our system. And then the rest of the pie is just our administration costs to run this. We are one of the largest DOTs. At one time, we were around number 2 in the nation. Our fleet is the largest fleet of DOT in the nation. So this is why it takes this amount to maintain the system they have. And Frank mentioned earlier, other states, some of those states maintain county roads, but in North Carolina, we're one of about a dozen states that maintain the majority of all roads. All right, before I go into projects, Frank, I'm just going to ask if there's any questions on the planning part and any of the budget, just so I know how much time I've got left to talk about projects.
And we're flexible on time. I don't have a set end time on this. The one question that's been submitted is about projects, and I'll go ahead and throw it out. You're probably going to get to it, but it's that Cheryl asked, I'm very interested in understanding when widening and improvements to Highway 87 and Bowling Spring Lakes will begin. So I don't, you've probably got something on that in your upcoming projects. If not, I'll go ahead and throw it out there for you.
Okay. On 87 and Bowling Spring Lakes?
Yes.
On any type of road improvement?
Maybe, yeah, whatever you've got coming up there, when it will begin and what you're doing.
Okay. All right. Let me go through the projects and then we'll follow up. So the first thing I want to do is go over projects in development. And this is a nice sheet for everybody to have. I'm not going to read through these spreadsheets, but I am going to go through a couple of the terms in here just so you're familiar with them. But this is every project that's in our STIP, our Transportation Improvement Program. In one of the columns, you'll see ROWFY. That stands for our right-of-way. This means the year that we will start acquiring right-of-way for that project. You'll see a CON-FY, that's construction. And keep in mind, we put our years in fiscal years. We are currently in fiscal year 2024. Our fiscal years go from July 1st to June 30th. So a lot of times when you see 2028, it could actually start in 2027. But just keep in mind, they are in fiscal years. And these are just cheat sheets, you know, for you to look up down the road. And we're going to go over, highlight some of the main ones in this. All right. And when I go through the projects here, once again, it'll have the right-of-way date, it'll have construction date, and the cost up here at the top. The first project here is actually one of my favorite here, because every time it rains out here on 133, if we have a 2-inch rain event, we basically have to detour traffic on 133. So this is Funston Road that comes in to 133. We are actually going to place a bridge and a couple of culverts at this location. We actually accelerated this. This was not a funded project just a few years ago. We were able to advance some bridge money so we could be able to build these bridges and get this more resilient to our rain events that we have in this region. So huge plus on this. This road will be shut down while we build that, but we will hold some public information workshops on that as we get closer. And we are getting close with construction starting in about a year. All right, this map here, this is basically the bypass around Shallotte. Basically on both ends of Shallotte, we have full movement signalized intersections on both sides of Main Street. These will be going to what we call, you may have heard them as super streets. We're now calling them reduced conflict intersections. But basically we're removing those left outs. Typically, anytime you see this design that we've got going on, and we've got several of these in Brunswick County, it is for safety. Typically it means there has been fatalities or multiple fatalities in some cases at some of these locations. For these improvements, there's a rule of thumb. It's a 20-40-60 rule. Basically, with this treatment here, I can increase travel times by 20% with this treatment than the full movement signalized intersection. I can reduce the amount of wrecks by 40% with this treatment. The last number, 60%, is I can reduce the severity of the injuries. So these do save lives. We continue to monitor these after they're installed and do statistics on them. But the 20-40-60 is starting to be a proven ratio for these type of treatments. Just real quick, I'm not going to talk too long on this. This is a project for right-of-ways in 2028. It's a funded project. This is Smith Street. We just recently put a temporary signal out there until this project comes here. But this is Smith Street, and Shallotte will become a full-flowing, free-flowing interchange. All right, US 17, NC 211. 211 is our planning partners and DOT's one of our top priorities. The end result is we want a 4-lane 211 from Southport all the way to this location right here. The interchange is a project by itself. Right now, it's in the back year of the 10-year program. However, we have started working on design on this. We are anticipating all this to be 4 lanes leading up to this. This will be a free-flowing interchange. And basically, everybody knows this left turn here today is just tremendous with the backups. That's a free-flowing loop and a separate ramp to head south at this location. I will tell you also, sometimes when it's in the program and even in the back, we have a piece of vacant property that's been advertised in this quadrant C that you see here. We are actually in the process of acquiring that parcel. The reason for this is we do not want right-of-way costs to escalate on us. If the parcel is vacant and we know it's going to develop, we don't want to go in there after it's developed and spend additional money just because it developed before we got there. So anything existing operating like McDonald's, Bojangles, Hardee's, they'll continue to do business as is until we get to the right-of-way date. But this is a critical improvement to Brunswick County. All right, projects under construction. This is the one I really didn't want to talk about today, but we will. Midway Road Bridge. So the contractor is trying to wrap this up. I'll give you the latest and greatest that came in just right before this presentation. They're having some issues with some of the slopes out there. They hope to have this addressed by Friday. Let's keep our fingers crossed that this is opened up by the end of the week. We're putting as much pressure on the contractor as we can. We do have liquidated damages for every day he does not have this bridge open, which is charged against the contractor that will recoup. But the most important thing to know is we know that this is a critical route for Brunswick County. All of us use this route. If there's an evacuation to a storm, it's got to be used, but we are pushing as hard as we can. So hopefully we will have this open by the end of this week. Next project that was just recently awarded. This is in Calabash. This is over the Calabash River. This is a critical bridge that in the last few storms actually overtopped the existing bridge. We actually moved funds up. This was not even in our 10-year program. We were able to accelerate this due to the flooding concerns there. The big negative about this project is it does have to be detoured. We do have to close the road down. We did put a $750,000 incentive to finish this as fast as we could. This does close down after Labor Day, and then the clock starts ticking. We want to go through one summer season with the road closed and then have it open by May 1st, 2025. I will also state, because of the pedestrian needs in that area, and the town of Calabash has a kayak launch right at the river at this location, we are building a very similar bridge to what was built in Surf City with a dedicated multi-use path. You will be able to walk from the river to Calabash when this bridge is complete. It's also the intent is to connect Calabash to Sunset Beach one day with a walking path. So this will set the future for the dedicated multi-use path on the structure. This is the detour. Not going to go into too many details. We do know it will inconvenience, especially the folks in this corner of Shoreline right here. We have coordinated with the fire departments, EMS. They have restaged, so their response time is basically the same in case there are emergencies. But like I said, there is strong coordination between the county, the towns, whether it's Calabash or Sunset Beach, and the emergency services for this detour. This one real quick is just another one of the super streets just north of Shallotte. This is at Red Bug Road. Don't know if many of you go to the charter school in that area, but this one is under construction, and just want everybody to be aware of that one. This project here is located, and this map really doesn't show the new Belleville Town Hall where it's located, but this is a project we just had a ribbon cutting on last week. These are improvements to River Road leading up to the Divergent Diamond. Basically, this will allow more storage going into the Divergent Diamond, but most importantly, it also provides a multi-use path from the gas station down past the town hall, which will tie into their existing boardwalks that they have along the river. So allows us a little bit more capacity going into the Divergent Diamond. NC 211. It's one of my favorite projects. Like I said, this is one of our priorities. The project that is under construction basically goes from 87 and Southport back to Midway Road, and it's about 8 miles long. And this was awarded for a little under $220 million. This was the largest let project ever in this part of the state, and one of the largest ever in the state of North Carolina. It is a massive undertaking going from a 2-lane to a 4-lane with this amount of development going up in that region at the same time. There are huge utility upgrades. Water and sewer is getting upgraded as part of this project. That's been going on for years. We started working on utilities several years before the construction started. So excited to get this one kicked off. There are 2 interchanges in this project. And once again, this was to assist with evacuations for storms. The first one is here at Midway Road or at Middleton. Basically, as you see here, you will see that Middleton and Midway will go over 211, and that is so it does not interfere with traffic on 211. All these designs you're getting ready to see were to reduce all the impacts to the existing businesses that were in place there. And that's a good thing, especially on this next interchange. I don't know how we finally figured this out, but we had very or little impacts to all of the existing businesses that was in this footprint. But this is, of course, the Long Beach Road. This will also be flying over 211, free flowing, to separate traffic from 211. And this picture right here on your right side of your screen here is what 211 will look like. Keep in mind 211, because of the flooding issues, we are overall raising the roadway 5 to 6 foot on average. You are seeing this as they're building currently this section over here on the west side. You can see how much higher that's taken shape out there. This picture on the left, this is a couple months old. The bridge fills are in. You're going to start seeing a bridge being built over here shortly. But this project is moving along. Once again, we have strong partnerships with all the communities along this corridor, with St. James, Oak Island, Southport, Brunswick County. And I can't state enough how important those partnerships have to be for a project like this to be successful. Once again, this is a massive project. We generally do not see them on this scale.
Yeah, we have one question that I think is pertinent to this. It says, will that be increased to 4 lanes with the flyover? And I'm assuming that's referring to this. Cheryl, if it's not, if you can add a clarification in the chat. No, that was on Long Beach Road is what she was talking about, I guess. By the time it got entered, we were on this slide. She's wondering if it's where Long Beach Road, where you were talking about previously. The question was, will it be increased to 4 lanes with the flyover?
Long Beach Road itself will continue with the same traffic pattern as it is today.
Okay. And Cheryl, if you have any other questions, put them in there and we'll get them.
And basically, and that's also a good question. So when we look at these bridges, we look at the traffic forecast. It's not based on today's numbers. The traffic forecasts are always based 20 years from now. So those bridges are designed to handle traffic 20 years from now instead of what we see out there today. All right, another project that is under construction that we've run into a couple of hurdles with, and this is down at Hickman Road, US 17, the southern part of the county, which is our cut through down to South Carolina. Everybody noticed all the barrels sitting out there and no work going on. In my career, which has been about 30 years, we've only had 2 contractors over that span to go bankrupt and walked off the project, and this was one of those. Typically in years past, you go back on the bonding company, you end up having to relet the project. It takes about a year and a half to pick back up on it. In this case, we were very fortunate. We were at a point where we were really down to just a little bit of curbing work and mainly paving work. So one of the subcontractors, who is one of our main paving resurfacing contractors, was able to work out a deal with the bonding company, and they took over this project, which actually sped things up a lot. So now we hope to be, our new completion date is by the end of October on this project. So hopefully that's some good news. You should have seen, if you've been out there in the last week, you should have seen them out there working, but they are back working on this project. And this is another one of those areas too, the Hickman Road, US 17, when you speak of fatalities, there are multiple fatalities at that location. And these are just some drawings I'm not going to go through. We're getting familiar with a lot of these super street designs. So looking to the future, what's some of our top priorities? The first one here is Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. I'm sure most everyone has heard a lot of conversations on this. So basically, I'll just give you a little bit of a background. It is over 50 years old now. We're down to 3 movable spans in Southeast North Carolina. And basically, at a point on movable spans, the maintenance costs start to be so high, you've got to go ahead and start looking at replacing. And we've got numbers here that talks about our costs, but basically your lifespans start reducing because you have to do major rehab on it to keep increasing your lifespans. So basically our movable spans down to a 10-year lifespan, fixed span 20. His bridge is expected to carry 80,000 cars a day here shortly. It's already pushing 70,000 cars. It's increasing rapidly. Our state ports is growing. We're having more tractor trailers on it. So it's causing a lot of additional issues on it. So this will be the first group I have shown this to, speaking of maintenance costs. I told you it was supposed to be 10 years before our next major rehab. We actually are only going to make it about 5 years. And I'm going to show you some pictures of the existing deck out there. But because of the additional traffic, we're having a lot of failures on the bridge. Our shims are breaking, our stringers are fracturing, which is causing a lot of these plates to pop out. We're actually out there working on a lot of nights, re-welding these parts. But we do have to replace this whole deck, this riding deck, this coming winter. And we're currently putting this contract together. It is going to have some major traffic impact in the region. We will have to shut down a direction at a time for several weeks at a time, but we have to get this deck right. And this just shows before, after we cleaned it out, and after that's a temporary repair until we get the new deck on here. And this, you can actually see some of the failures in the deck. You can see it in the stringers. You can see over here where a shim, and a shim is to help the rideability of the deck. When you go across it, you may have noticed how it's kind of bumpy. These shims reduce how bumpy it gets, but when the shim breaks, typically the stringers break as well too. Like I said, these are new pictures that we're starting to release, and this is the first time I've shown these pictures to anybody, just so we can start getting a understanding of what's going on with the deck right now. This is typically what happens when they go out there in the morning. They can see a section missing. All right, so let's get back to replacing the bridge, which is our priority. We kicked off a high-level look on how to replace this bridge. Basically, it has to be replaced. All options are replacing it right adjacent on the south side. We cannot go to the north side because of the historic side of Wilmington. But basically, we're concentrating on a 135-foot fixed span or a 65-foot fixed span. Today, when the bridge opens into the open position, we have 135-foot clearance. So that's the reason why we are looking at the 135-foot. The Coast Guard approved that clearance years ago, and they more than likely will want to keep that clearance at 135. This will be what the bridge will look like from a typical section. Basically, we will be going from a 4 to a 6 lane. Note over here on the side, there is no connectivity between Brunswick County and New Hanover County for people walking or riding a bike. We want be able to make that connection. I could see this connection eventually making it down to Belleville and tying into their walkways, and also making it out to the battleship. But anyway, increasing the capacity a lot with this design here. Now we're going to go back and kind of look at the cost of these options. Basically, when you're looking at a 135-foot span, you're looking at about a $400 million bridge. In comparison, think about what I just showed you earlier on Calabash. That was about a $10 million bridge. So, and that's a pretty big bridge in Calabash. The bridge in Surf City that was the last major high rise we built. That was around a $60 million bridge. So we're looking at $400 million to replace the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge with a 130-foot clearance. We did submit this into our prioritization process like we talked about earlier in our last round of prioritization. I'm not going to get in numbers too much, but we were about 20 some billion dollars difference in projects and getting it scored. That was in between this one and the other project to get it scored. So when you competing against all the projects in the state, there was about $20 billion of projects that were scoring better in Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. So hence we're having a few funding challenges. We are working with the WMPO and that planning organization on looking at all options. We're looking at options such as federal grants to help offset some of that cost. Typically, let's say if we can go out and get a $200 million grant, which will bring the overall cost down by $200 million, this will score a lot better in our prioritization process. That's just an option of one of the things we're looking at. We're looking at other alternative designs or deliveries, such as public-private partnerships with these private entities. And like I said, just looking at all various options to be able to fund this. It is a top priority, and we're doing everything we can, working with our partners on that project. All right, next important project for Brunswick County. We're going to talk a little bit about Carolina Bays. So Carolina Bays is basically the Little River Bypass or the 31 extension coming out of South Carolina. We have been working on this project for the last 4 or 5 years on this merger process, and a merger process is where we identify these corridors that has the least amount of impacts to the human and the natural environment. This has been going on. We've got 8 corridors. That's all the lines that you see out here. We are one seat at a table of approximately 17 to 20 agencies. These include agencies from the Corps of Engineers, Federal Highways, CAMA, all the Division of Environmental Quality. But they all make the decisions where these corridors are chosen. Like I said earlier, the draft statement is scheduled to come out late this year. This will be about a 2,000-page document that will take each of these corridors and shows you the impacts associated with those corridors. Whether it's the amount of houses, you'll see if cemeteries, if a school, you'll see wetlands, you'll see types of endangered species, you'll see environmental justice areas, but all of those will be listed. And at this point, they're going to want to hear feedback from the public, which will be after the new year, because public input is very important. I can tell you, if you go to the website, you can just type this into Google and you can pull up all these alternatives, but alternative 4 and 4A has the least amount of environmental impacts. So it is important that everybody goes in there, looks at that, and gives their comments on that, because comments is huge on final decision. After that final input comes in, the decision will be made a few months after that input, and then that corridor is chosen and it is set. South Carolina is fully funded for their portion. North Carolina, we are unfunded. And once again, this is one of our top priorities, to figure out how to fund it. Just in North Carolina, our portion is around $500 million. Once again, it goes back to Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. These are huge numbers. I mean, the largest project we ever let, we talked earlier about 211 at $220 million. These are double the size of those projects. So once again, we're looking at all available options to fund this through prioritization, through grants. Once again, it was ran through prioritization. It was falling probably 20 billion short of the next closest project that got picked up in statewide funding. And that's the reason why we're looking at all these other potential options on funding this. Excellent project for Brunswick County. It really is going to open up the gateway to the south. The development is just tremendous in this part of the county. And lastly, on a couple other projects, these are not in Brunswick County, but I just want to point out they do affect Brunswick County, but Hampstead Bypass, which is actually in a portion of the Cape Fear RPO. A portion of that is under construction. And all of the Hampstead bypass will be opened up by before 2030. We'll have the first section open by 2026. And I'm not going to go into details on this just because we're sticking in Brunswick. And then I've got some real exciting news that's actually in New Hanover County. We will be opening up the new military cutoff extension in September. And these are just some pictures. Like I said, I'm not going to spend any time showing this, but this will be a new 4-lane, 6-lane facility from Market Street up to I-140, which will tie into Hampstead and which technically will have connection to Brunswick County. I will tell you, yesterday, I had a doctor's appointment in Leland. I live in Surf City. I will be able to get to a doctor's office in Leland quicker than I can to the hospital in Wellington when all this opens up. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring this up, because it does have a connection to Brunswick County. So with that, I'm out of breath, Frank.
Well, thank you for covering all of that, and I will start going through the questions and let you handle those. One of them, a couple of them are related to things you talked about. And the first one is with regards to the culvert and bridge project on Highway 133 at Funston. How long is the projected project duration? And I think by extension, how long would you expect 133 to be closed? And I'll add a question. What do you think the detour would be?
Good questions. I mean, typically, we'll keep that closure down to a year, if at all possible. We typically do not want to go through more than one summer season. We try to do it in the off season, depending on the size of the bridge. What I will do, Frank, we will send you, if we've got those dates yet. I'm not sure we'll have those dates yet, but we'll send you a detour too, so you can post.
Do you think
because
do you think the detour would be one where they don't have to go too far, or they're going to have to go all the way back up 17 and through BSL?
I don't know yet. And one thing that we learned from Midway Road, that shouldn't have been detoured like it should have been. We should have been out and widened that detour, the one that the locals use. We ended up changing the detour for the truckers, but all this is being looked at on this. It was one of those lessons learned. Like if we need to go out and widen a secondary road to make the detour shorter, then we will.
And I would say that's a pretty major thoroughfare, especially people from Duke Energy that work in Leland and Wilmington, and trucks galore go up and down that road. And I would encourage you to make sure you communicate with Sunny Point on that as well.
Thank you.
Next one is, what is the estimated time of completion for the Ash Little River Bridge? And they said, I believe it's over the Caw. Yes.
So the Ash Little River Bridge is, that one is scheduled to be completed this fall.
Cool. Somebody says, not sure if I missed this, but will DOT be placing a roundabout where Red Bug Road meets Highway 130?
That's one of those that you can, while these plans are being developed, you can work with a planning organization and recommend that. I mean, just as soon as you said that, that's probably a great location for a roundabout. We are studying 130 all the way from Charlotte down to Holden Beach. We call that a feasibility study, looking at what we can do to make 130 better, and that may be part of that plan. But yeah, good idea there. And like I said, just make sure that you send that comment to us by email or through the planning organization. We'll take a look at that. But those are the ideas we're looking for. Because there's a lot of projects that I can look back and say citizens, actually that's where it originated from. And we go and we start studying it, and sure enough, it's the right fit.
That one came from a county staffer, and I think I saw Chairman Thompson on earlier, and I believe that's in GSAT's area, and he's on that board. So, Randy, if you're still on, if you can make note of that, and Amber, if you can send that to me by email, I'll make sure it gets to where it needs to go. Going back to the original question, in talking about widening and improvements on Highway 87 and Boiling Spring Lakes, what's planned there and when would it happen?
Yeah. So right now for Boiling Spring, I don't have anything on my radar for Boiling Springs.
So, they do have some projects identified in the draft CTP. Your RPOs for the whole Brunswick County CTP. We can send a link to that. It's in the draft stages, but they've identified a few projects, but they're not funded.
Okay, so I've got Caitlin here with me. So long range plan, this is where we need to start talking about this. This is in that CTP that we originally
Right.
talked about. And Caitlin believes there are a couple of projects identified in the long range plan in the CTP. But it is a conversation that's going to need to be held, because eventually we're going to have to look either at 133 or 87 going through Bowling Springs one day down the road. Something more than likely will need to be 4-lane heading down toward Oak Island and the Southport area. The bridges are going to need replacing there in Bowling Springs too. I think we've got a bridge that's actually going to be replaced on 87 as well too in the next few years. But good, once again, good feedback. It's a conversation that needs to be held. And that goes back to these planning organizations and stay involved with them, because that is definitely long range is in our radar.
And next one is, what is the status of the Highway 130 Longwood Road intersection?
130 Longwood.
Or 211.
And you may have answered it when you said y'all are looking at the whole 130 corridor.
Yes, if it's outside of that corridor, I'll need to take a look. Can I get, if they can send a little bit more information on that, that would be great.
Clint, if you can email me that, he said Welcome Off School Road.
Yeah. And if Clint, I believe that's you that sent that in.
Yeah.
If you could just send us an email of that, and that way I'll run it down and see if we got anything on the books. That one's not coming to mind, but we may have a study going on with that.
And Sam from the RPO just chimed in and said he can confirm that the RPO is coordinating with BSL staff to identify project needs in both short and long term there. And I know we had a meeting with the municipalities from the RPO area, and that was discussed there, but I didn't remember specifics. So that's, you know, I will say, going back to something Chad said, if you're on this call and you have an idea for a project, send it to us. If you want to send them to me, I can make sure they get to where they need to be, to the right group. But send them now, because we have a deadline with the RPO to get any new project ideas to our staff in a few weeks here. So don't wait till October, because then it'll be 2 years before it can get into the hopper. So if you've got one, send it now and be as specific as possible. Don't just say we need more roads in Shallotte. Say something like we need a roundabout at 130 and Redbug Road, just so we've got some specifics we can turn in.
Yeah.
Clint said there are materials and construction beginning for the past year. Clint, if you want to email me, I can put you guys in touch and y'all can figure that out, because that sounds like might need to be some research done there on the 130.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to mention, Frank, you know, we have a lot of studies going on. 133, you know, where I showed you the project in Belleville, we are studying to see about the possibility of widening 133, taking it south down to the first major creek there. I can't think of the name of the creek, but we're studying that. You know, we're studying take 74, 76 coming in. You know, long range goal 74, 76 is becoming interstate.
Right.
So we're looking, you know, probably one of the biggest mistakes that we made on a newer project was when I-140 was built, and they built the interchange out 74, 76, and we put 2 signals out there on 74, 76. That should have never happened. That should have been a free flowing interchange. So we've got to start looking at upgrading, even at Mako intersection. We've identified that as an intersection that needs to be an interchange. So you will see over the next several years, we'll be attacking projects to make 74, 76 more of an interstate type facility. But that's going to be it's going to be a 30-year plan for the size of that project, but we are going to start taking steps toward that.
And you kind of said a perfect segue to something I wanted to say when you said it's a 30-year plan. You know, prioritization is a 2-year process, but the fact that something gets prioritized and maybe even approved in 2 years doesn't mean it's going to be built in 2 years. It might be 5 or 10 years, depending on what the funding is like. Is that, Chad, do you want to say anything about that and about how long some of these things are in the hopper before they get built?
Yeah, I mean, it truly does take a career to see some projects come to fruition. I mean, you think about I-140, you know, that went on for 30 years before it was totally complete. We're seeing the same thing with the Hampstead bypass. It's a career to get through that, but once you see the amount of money, just like what we're talking with Cape Fear Memorial Bridge or Caroline Bays. If you look at the money, the $500 million, and then what you got to go through with the environmental merger process and the planning part, it takes years. You know, I often say at a groundbreaking, you know, we've gone through the hard part. Once it goes to construction, to me, it's the easy part because it's fully funded. We know where it's going. We just got to build it and open it. And but there are years in the making on planning for projects, and it really comes down to availability of money. I mean, you're only getting $6.5 billion, $6.5 billion for the entire state for a 2-year period. That does not go far.
Yeah.
And legislation controls our budget at DOT. Is solely where it comes from, and they are working on ideas on how to increase that revenue for more projects. But you know, that's just something we got to keep on pushing.
Absolutely. You know, it can be maddening how long it takes. And one thing that I think people need to know is going back to prioritization. You mentioned it's data driven, so things have to score on a certain scale of parameters in order to be potentially funded. It's on existing congestion most of the time, not future congestion. The congestion number is it congested now? And I think that's important for people to know that, you know, for it to score well there, it's going to be congested before it does. You want to talk any more about that just so people can understand kind of how that works?
I think you've covered that, Frank.
And it's frustrating. I wish there were resources to be more proactive, but the way the state formula works now, that's just not how it works.
Yep, and we are, and that's the thing about prioritization. It is a great system. Data driven is where you want to be, but it is reactionary, which means you've got to have the numbers. Like we know Brunswick County's fastest growing county in the state. It's one of the fastest growing in the nation. We know that. We know there's X amount of subdivisions coming, but until I actually have those subdivisions built out and people's living in there, I've got to have the traffic count to help these projects score better. And that's where the challenges lie in a county like Brunswick. All of our counties on our East Coast are in this position. They're growing like crazy, and our DOT formula can't catch up until it's built out. So that's really the issue on the funding.
I hear people say, you know, Raleigh gets these funds. I see these projects in Raleigh, but tying this together with an earlier point, some of those may have been planned 25 years ago, and they're finally getting built, some of the really big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to their traffic volumes are completely, they're about double than ours, in some places triple.
I just received one more question. I actually got this one by text message, which I think is amusing since we've got the Q&A feature, but it says to ask you how much money is available for Division 3 and Prioritization 7.0 and explain what that means.
So for all 3 pots of money, so statewide, all right, statewide, there's around $4 billion. So as I stated, there's 3 buckets of money. So all projects compete against every project across the state for that $4 billion. All right, there is a regional pot that's typically somewhere on average, can be anywhere from 100 to 200 million that you compete with. On the division pot, which stays in the division, but they just compete against projects in the division, is typically on average under 100 million. So I hope that kind of spells that out. And each division has roughly that same amount.
Well, to further complicate it, is that all highway money or is that across all modes? That dollar figure you just gave?
That's all modes.
Okay.
But
so that's not just roads, that's ferry, that's bike ped, that's other things too.
Yes, but the
aviation.
Roads carry the most weight. There's max limits on an aviation project. And I think that's what's the maximum of aviation? 500,000? Yeah, 500,000 max an aviation project can be. So our roads, you know, do not have that cap on it. I would say, you know, this would be a rough guess, but I would say 95% goes to highways.
Yeah. Just a couple of practical questions. Maintenance is a whole separate process than new construction, correct?
Yes.
For repaving. And how about things like stoplights? So those aren't prioritization, is that correct?
That's correct. So stoplights are signals, and this will be something that shocks people. We actually do not have a budget for signals. If we do a signal, it will come out of repairing potholes and so forth. So we try to be creative on how we fund signals, and this is through developers. We utilize developers a lot, how they trigger the signals. If you have a development that goes in and they meet the warrant for a signal. Also, our new highway projects, we try to use our TIP funds for those signals. But we've probably got hundreds of locations that meet the warrants for a signal, but we do not have a funding source just for signals. We try to tie it into a safety project. You've probably seen some of these always stops that are going in. These always stops are taking the place of a signal and are being proven effective. And it's $1,000 for an always stop versus a signal in this area now is around $275,000.
Well, and those of you who drive through Old Fayetteville and Landville Road will notice the signal at that intersection. It took years to get that, and I don't even remember how we eventually got it funded. I know it took years and everybody under the sun lobbying to make the case for the importance of that for you to be able to do it. And I know you wanted to do it, you just weren't able to for a while.
Yeah, we finally pieced it together. We got it there.
And we still have time for a couple of questions. If anybody wants to post any more, I'll read a couple of comments that have been posted in the Q&A. One is from Brunswick County Sheriff Brian Chisholm, says, just want to say thank you for your time. And the other from Shirley Lawler said, thank you for the presentation, very helpful.
Caitlin does have an update on 130 in Longwood.
So that is a safety project. We are doing a realignment at that intersection. So it's what we call a safety project. It's got a W- as the identifier. We are emailing the resident engineer for that to get a completion date, but it's looking like as of May, it was looking at spring of 2024. But like I said, we'll get a more defined update. I think it was Clint who asked that question. If he still wants to email us, we can give him that date.
Clint, if you're still on, just put a thumbs up so we know you heard the answer. If not, I'll try to get that to you. Well, just a couple of closing comments. One, if you have ideas on projects, I put my website link in the chat. You can email me through the contact page there. I will get that project idea to whichever planning group that it needs to be sent to, depending on where it is. I do want to point out that the county government and county tax dollars did not help organize this event. I did it at my own expense. And Chad, I thank you for participating. The next one of these will be September the 18th, which is a Monday, the day after Constitution Day. And we will have a special guest speaker talking about both the U.S. Constitution and our state constitution. So I'd encourage you to sign in for that. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending, and we do appreciate Chad. Thank you for your time. Do you have any closing comments?
No, the main thing is we have to work together. And if there's not a bad idea out there, please work with all of us, our partners, our planning partners. I mean, we have to do this together, and the more we work together, the more we can get here. But I appreciate everything for this, Frank, for us to get this information out. And
thank you. And I'll say this, don't assume that DOT knows about something. There was a situation a while back where I think there were rocks in the road, and somebody related to me, and I let Chad know, and I think y'all cleaned it up within about an hour or two because it was a safety issue. Another time there was a specific intersection where the grass was so high people couldn't see when they were turning, and somebody let me know, and I let him know, and they addressed it. He can't be everywhere and see everything, so let us know if you see something and we'll pass it along. But again, thank you, Chad, for your time, and I appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll send out the full video of this in the next few days if anyone wants to view it again or share it. But thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.